What up, nation? You call the shots. Should the Raiders franchise tag Josh Jacobs? Give me a yes, give me a no. If you come across this video, this channel is based on the voices of the nation. Like, I want us to be heard. I want us to be loud and proud down in the comments. So if you think that the Raiders should franchise Jacobs, give me a yes, give me a no. My answer is going to be at the very end of today's show. Raider Nation, what's going on? It's Mitchell Rentz here, host of the Raiders Report, and it's good to be back. Why the Raiders should and shouldn't franchise tag Josh Jacobs, that's going to be coming up here on today's episode. The reason why that we're talking about it is because the window of when NFL teams can franchise tag a player starts today, and it ends on March 5th. So the Raiders, they have a decision that needs to be made. It ends on March 5th at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, which then kind of opens up a brand new window of what we're about to get into, which maybe is my favorite time of the year in NFL free agency. March 11th is when it technically starts. The tampering period can get going, and then when guys officially sign is March 13th. But there's going to be a lot of stuff that ends up happening over the next 2 or 3 weeks that you guys cannot afford to miss. If you're wondering, well, Mitch, where do the Raiders currently stand? Salary cap-wise, $42.6 million. It's the 10th most in the NFL. 55 players have been currently signed with the Raiders, and I do project the Raiders to be extremely aggressive this offseason. Yes, they're going to have some money from Jimmy Garoppolo. They're going to have some guys like Hunter Renfrow. I project Las Vegas to be able to get around $65, $70, $75 million in overall cap space, which is plenty of money to go out and spend, which puts you, if the Raiders can get to 75 mil, you're like second in the NFL in overall salary cap space. But the reason why all of y'all are watching is because if there's going to be a player that the silver and black franchise tag, it's the running back, Josh Jacobs. And if you're having deja vu like me, believe me when I tell you I feel it, because all the conversations that we had last year, they're the same, but they are a little bit different considering the fact of Jacobs' relationship with Antonio Pearson, with this current regime that he's had, on top of the fact that 2022, career year. 2023, the worst year of his career. But the Raiders, they tagged Jacobs last season. And because the Raiders tagged him, a lot of people thought, well, Mitch, now you have to give him that extra 20%. That's not true because the Raiders ended up reaching that one-year deal with Jacobs before the season started. So if the Las Vegas Raiders were to franchise tag number 8, it would cost $11.3 million for this season. But before anybody asks, because I already know I'm going to get it because I got it last year, and this is one of the things that I need to do better as a host, and I need to be able to paint a better picture of. People said, well, Mitch, why can't we just franchise tag somebody else? You can. You can franchise tag somebody else, but the bottom line is this. The Raiders will not franchise tag anybody unless that person's name is Josh Jacobs. Why? It simply does not make sense. Like, Jacobs is the top free agent that the Raiders have, and if they want to franchise tag another player, this is what it would end up costing. So if you're wondering, all right, well, how do you get to the number 11.3? A lot of times it's just averages of current salaries already in the NFL. So if the Raiders wanted to franchise tag a linebacker, a DT, a receiver, defensive end, offensive line, cornerback, safety, tight end, running back, that's how much it would cost. And no disrespect to all the other free agents that the Raiders have, or that the other free agents that are getting ready to hit the open market. None of them deserve to make this amount of money on a single year. The only player that is deserving is Josh Jacobs at $11.3 million. But here's the thing. I am probably the most excited for this offseason that I have been in a long time. And if you're watching at home right now, I don't care where you are, raise your hand if you're like me. I rooted for the Raiders through and through. I'm a Raider fan through and through, right? Like, shout out to Taino Raider for sending me this jersey. The amount of patches we got on this thing, I mean, it is unbelievable. Heck, he had to give me an extra large jersey just so we could fit them all on here. But my point is this. I am so excited for free agency this offseason. I know the Raiders are going to be aggressive, but I rooted for the Raiders the last 2 years because I'm a Raider fan. But I did not believe in Josh McDaniels. I believe in Antonio Pierce. And for the first time in a long time, I really, really, truly believe in what this organization is doing. And when the Raiders sign somebody, I promise you this, we're going to be live. We're going to be getting wild. You better believe it. So coming up here on today's show, we're going to be looking at some of the ins and outs of Josh Jacobs, of why the Raiders should sign him. And then we're going to say, or not sign, why the Raiders should tag him, and why the Raiders shouldn't franchise tag Jacobs. And then at the very, very end of today's episode, I'm going to tell you whether or not I think they do or they don't franchise tag him, because I had the opportunity to sit down with some NFL analysts, insiders at Media Row during the Super Bowl, and I got some pretty damn good insight, if you ask me. So here's why the Raiders should tag Josh Jacobs. I know he's coming off a bad year for Jacobs' standpoint, but does everybody out there believe that Josh Jacobs is still a top 10 running back in the NFL? I know I do. I believe if you put the right offensive line, and if you give him a good quarterback, and then you put him in a better system that's not run by Josh McDaniels, I'll tell you this right now, I believe that Josh Jacobs is still a top running back in the NFL, and with that, because y'all know how I believe, I want the Raiders to be able to add a young quarterback. To me, one of the easiest safety blankets that you could have, whether it's Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, hell, if you're talking about J.J. McCarthy, Bo Nix, whoever it is, I want the Raiders to draft a QB. You know what's a good safety blanket? Josh Jacobs. Josh Jacobs. Hand him the rock. All right, the next thing is why you do it is he's got a great relationship with Antonio Pierce in it, and it kind of ties into our next note as well, where he's loved by the locker room. They gave him a captain status for a reason. Every single Raiders player that I've ever talked to says nothing but very highly encouraging things about Jacobs, and says that he's a great leader in the locker room, but he also brings that Raider tenacity that I want guys to have. I want somebody that wants to run through a wall for the silver and black. And the people that I talk to say that about Jacobs. On top of that, if Antonio Pierce, who to me has never stepped up to the podium and told me something that I didn't believe. Like when Josh McDaniels used to talk, I felt like I was wasting my time. I didn't even want to listen to him because I didn't believe anything that he said. When Antonio Pierce talks, I stop what I'm doing and I listen. And when he says that Josh Jacobs is the heart and soul of the team, I think I got to believe that. No? Next thing is this. The Raiders, no matter what, are going to need to be able to add a running back. Like, I think Zamir White, what he was able to do over the 4 final games of the season was impressive. And I stepped up here on this show and I said, Zamir White's not very good. Zamir White proved me wrong. He proved me that he's the type of running back that once you get him some work, he's like going to get better and better and better. It almost reminded me of my old baseball days where, or just like anything, as soon as you stop playing a sport, as soon as you stop doing something, hell, if you go on vacation for a week and then you try to do a show again, you lose that mojo a little bit and you just need to get back into the ring. My biggest point is, though, Amir Abdullah, I don't see him coming back. Jakob Johnson, I don't see him coming back. Brandon Bolden, you better cut his ass. Sincere McCormick, he will be back. But if you decide to move on from Jacobs, no matter what, you are still going to have to bring in a running back, whether that be via the draft or free agency. So if you want a guy that's your guy and a guy that has already said that he's in on the Raiders, I think Jacobs is a pretty good option. Then the final one is this. He fits with the offensive coaches that the Raiders have hired. I'm not crazy about the Luke Getsy hire, the Raiders offensive coordinator. I'll tell you that right now. But does he fit with Antonio Pierce? The answer to that is absolutely. Does he fit with a Luke Getsy offense? Yes, I actually do think so. I'm worried if you move on from Jacobs and you're going to run a Getsy offense, you're still going to want to run the football, and you're going to have a good running option. What about the Raiders' new offensive line coach, Craig? Guess what type of running attack he works with? Is with a guy like Josh Jacobs. And I know the Raiders have Carnell or Cadillac Williams as their running back coach, and he likes to go with more of a running back by committee, likes to get backs involved in the passing game as well. That's not Zamir White. I think Jacobs proved that he can still be a reliable back, but to me, the offensive coaches that the Raiders have brought in this offseason do fit Josh Jacobs very well. On top of that, though, I think most offenses probably fit a healthy Josh Jacobs pretty damn well. I'm going to tell you why the Raiders should not franchise tag Josh Jacobs in just a second, but if y'all haven't already gotten started with our awesome sponsor, Game Time, I mean this right now. It is the perfect time to get started. The offseason to me is always a time where I'm like, what am I going to do with my free time? Like somebody earlier on today's Raiders Report show said, Mitch, Sundays aren't the same without Raiders football. I couldn't agree with you more. So you know what I like to do on the weekend? Look for a fun event. If you're looking for something under $50, Game Time has an option. So buying tickets to your favorite events, it shouldn't be stressful. Snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Nation, create an account and redeem code RaidersChat for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets. Lowest price guaranteed. Forget planning months in advance. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the day of the event. Get exclusive flash deals on tickets for football, basketball, concerts, comedy, theater, and a whole lot more. For anybody that's planning a trip out to Vegas, I do think it's the perfect app out there. Like, it seems like forever ago, but the Super Bowl, Chugs and I were out there at Las Vegas, and Jeremy had the opportunity to go watch Tom Segura and Brett Kreischer, and two of the best comedians, two of my favorite comedians personally. But the reason why he did it was because it was, Thursday, or did you buy him Thursday or Friday morning?
So what happened was the show was actually Saturday.
Yes.
I was checking Friday. They were like $90. I was like, maybe I go, maybe I don't go. Saturday morning, I check, $49.
And that's why I love Game Time, because you can
Thanks, Game Time.
You can plan an entire trip, and I don't like to overplan something when I'm going on a trip, vacation, because at the end of the day, I don't want to be stressed and I want it to be a vacation. But then there's opportunities where you're sitting there and you're like, all right, I got a few hours to kill. What can I do? And you're going to get the lowest price guarantee. And the reason why I love Game Time is they're like, I would rather put somebody in a seat for $1 than not put anybody in that seat, because they also know you're going to buy some food. You're going to buy a few drinks. You're also going to spend money while you're there. Game Time is a game changer for anybody going out to Las Vegas, or anybody planning a trip in general. So that link's going to be available to you all down in the comments and in the description of today's show. Shout out to Game Time for sponsoring the Raiders Report. All right, coming up next here on the show is why the Raiders shouldn't tag Josh Jacobs. And I always got to say this because I feel like every time I bring this up, people are like, oh, you don't like Jacobs. I love Jacobs. He is one of my favorite Raiders out there. Anybody that gets that shield tatted on him, believe me when I tell you, that's one of my guys. But when we do this show, we have to do it from a realistic standpoint. When I sit down and talk to my mom and dad and I ask for advice, I want the honest feedback, right? That's the only way that you grow as a human being. I want honest feedback. So here's my honest feedback of why you shouldn't tag Jacobs. He's coming off a career worst year. If you want to tag a running back when he's coming off his career best year in 2022, okay, I can kind of wrap my mind around it. But even last year, and I tried telling all y'all, I made a video last year saying history suggests the Raiders should not franchise tag Jacobs. I don't mean to say I told you so, but when you look at history a lot of times and you can read the tea leaves, it ends up being a very easy thing to talk about. Jacobs is a talented running back, yes. But when you consider the workload that he had the year before, it was not smart for the Raiders to franchise tag him, and it really wasn't all that smart for him to get a one-year deal done. If I was Raiders, I would have said, it's all right, Jacobs, you move on. The next reason is it's going to be too expensive. And some people might say $11.3 million too expensive for Jacobs. Yes. I promise you this. If Jacobs hits the open market, he's not getting $11.3 million. And it's not because Jacobs isn't a great running back. It's not because he couldn't be a great addition on another team. It's not because he's not a top RB in the league. It's because the NFL does not value running backs. Point blank, period. Think about all the deals that happened last year. Nobody paid a running back. And right now where running backs are, if you're a team that's a RB away from winning a Super Bowl, you pay Josh Jacobs $11.3 million. However, if I'm the Raiders, if I'm Antonio Pierce, if I'm Tom Telesco, I'm going to allocate that money elsewhere. If I told you that you could allocate $11.3 million and put that towards maybe getting a top defensive tackle, putting that towards maybe getting a top corner, putting that towards, I don't know, even signing a QB like Kirk Cousins. My point is, we saw last year, you could have arguably the best running back in the NFL. If your offensive line isn't playing well, if your quarterback has just guys stacking the box, it does not matter who your running back is if not everything else around him is perfect. And the only way that I believe that the Raiders should allocate that type of money to a running back is if everything else around him is perfect. And with the Raiders right now being Jermaine Illuminor, Greg Van Roten, and Andre James hitting free agency, that's 3 offensive linemen, 3 starting caliber offensive linemen. If you could use that $11.3 million and build an offensive line, I almost would rather you allocate that money better in that way. And then the last one is this. Jacobs wants a long-term deal. Like Jacobs and his team last offseason said, oh, I don't like the franchise tag because I wanted a longer-term deal. I wanted more guarantees. And if I'm a running back, I want more guarantees. If I'm a worker, if I'm a living being, think about the job that you're in right now. If they told you, hey, after a year, you could be fired. You don't want that. If you got family, if you got kids, which Jacobs has plenty, like you have to be able to think about your long-term living style. He's only 26 years old. And if a team would be willing to give him a 3-year deal, maybe it's less money per year, but I would much rather have a 3-year deal with less money than just a 1-year deal with more money. Jacobs wants a long-term deal, and if you franchise tag him, I'm not sure he's going to be happy. And if Jacobs isn't happy on a one-year deal making the most money, I don't want to go down a path that we went down last year where he was unmotivated, out of shape. You can say what you want. He was clearly out of shape at the start of the season. That's not worth the money to me. So coming up here next on the show is my prediction on whether or not the Raiders are going to tag Jacobs. Like, there's no doubt the Raiders want to tag Jacobs. There's no doubt that the Raiders want to bring Jacobs back. It's probably how I should say that. But still, there's a lot of things that need to end up happening in order for that deal to end up going down. For those that don't know, today is my birthday, and I just wanted to say thank you to everybody that tunes into the show. Thank you to everybody that takes time out of their day to wish me a happy birthday on IG, Twitter, during this live show. I mean, shout out to Urza and Lord Cameron Abbott. We're balling out on today's live show. Shout out to Taino Raider for sending me this Raider jersey, though it looks like a Raider poncho. But you know what? At the end of the day, I love this team. I love y'all. And as much as I love the Raiders, I love the nation 10 times more. And I do this show because of all of y'all. So I know I look like I'm wearing a dress right now. But I'll tell you this right now. I would wear a Raiders dress every single day of the week if it meant that I could do the show. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you guys a lot. I don't think you realize how much you do truly mean to me. So again, thank you for all the birthday wishes. So will the Raiders end up franchise tagging Josh Jacobs? I'm going to give this one only one just win, baby. For those that don't know what that means, it means that I say it is a less than a 25% chance of it happening. And the only reason why that I say this is because for both parties, the Raiders and Josh Jacobs, I think it's the best that if he does not get franchise tagged. To me, the Raiders, if they tag him at $11.3 million, it will be the most money that Jacobs gets on a per-year basis out there. So for the Raiders, you're getting kind of the short end of the stick. But for Jacobs, who I've already said wants a long-term deal, you don't want a long-term deal. And if there is any team out there right now that is willing to give you a long-term deal, it's the Raiders. Like, if I'm Jacobs, I want to come back and play with AP, which he does want to come back and play with AP. If I'm Antonio Pierce and I'm the Raiders, I want to bring him back on a longer-term deal. That way we can build around him a little bit more, and then it doesn't cost as much on a year-to-year basis. The numbers that I'm going to show you, you'll kind of paint the picture on that. But to me, Jacobs, at the end of the day, he ain't getting $11.3 million a year in a free agency. On top of that, I do not trust Josh Jacobs on the franchise tag. I'm a big person where until you break my trust, I trust you. Antonio Pierce, I'd run through a wall for that guy. Why? He has earned my trust. And until AP doesn't earn that trust, guess what? I'm going to trust him. Jacobs got the franchise tag last year, said, you know what, I'm not going to show up. I get it. He was looking for his money. He was looking for his bag, as he should do. But on top of that, you got to stay in football shape. Josh Jacobs was clearly not as good as what he was the year before, and clearly wasn't in the shape that he should have been, despite him saying that he was working out and doing all this stuff. Here's the thing, man. I look at it as coming into the office and working at home. I can work at home. I'm a good at-home worker. But when I'm in the office, I am 10 times more efficient. Why? There's not nearly as much distractions. So I don't trust Jacobs on the franchise tag. On top of that, I know he's not getting that type of money. So as Jacobs returning to Vegas, here's one of the things that Jeremy Fowler told me. Fowler had the opportunity to sit down with him and talk. I guess I shouldn't say sit down. Had the opportunity to stand with him and talk for about 5 to 10 minutes at Media Row during the Super Bowl. And he told me that the Raiders want to bring back Josh Jacobs. And he also told me that Josh wants to be a Raider. Obviously, money's got to make sense for everybody, but not tagging Jacobs doesn't mean that he won't return. In fact, I think the more likely scenario is that they go, all right, Josh, we're going to let you test free agency. We're going to do that. And then they end up signing him on a multi-year deal because that's what Jacobs wants. Jacobs wants a multi-year deal with whatever team that he ends up signing with. Now, if a team throws him a bag, Jacobs is going to take that bag. Like, he's not just going to sign with the Raiders because it's the Raiders. If an NFL team throws him a bag, he's going to take it. And when you look at the projected contracts from places like PFF and Spotrac, I'll tell you this right now. If a team throws Jacobs those numbers, he's going. Like, Spotrac to me, 4 years, $42.7 million is so off. It's not funny, and Spotrac has been very off on their running back projections over the past few years. Even PFF thinking that he's going to get $11.5 million on a 3-year deal. He didn't get this deal last year, coming off a career year. So when I look at both of these numbers, I don't want people to look at what PFF projected. I don't want people to look at Spotrac. And one of the reasons why we started this show is because people can throw out numbers, but they don't fully understand the idea, the conversation around the Raiders and Raiders in general. And to me, both of those contract projections are bad. That's not what's going to happen. Here is my take it or leave it offer to Josh Jacobs. And I get it. I might not get Jacobs back on my team. But at the end of the day, I don't do the Josh Jacobs report by Chat Sports. This is the Raiders report. And I will always put the shield above every player. I don't do this show to make players happy. It is, here's my offer. You're going to get a 2-year deal at $17 million with $17 million guaranteed. That's only $8.5 million per year. But you know what? If I'm the Raiders and I look at all the other needs that I have right now, I'm not necessarily thinking that I should allocate all my money to the running back position. This is, you want to play for us? You're coming off your career worst year? Well, guess what? I'm going to give you more guaranteed money than you have ever seen in your life. 2 years, $17 million. The other reason why I'm going to go 2 years is because I know for a fact the Raiders wanted Cliff Kingsbury on a 2-year deal. And from every person that I talk to is the Raiders this offseason, they're going to try to negotiate a lot of 2-year deals because they want to be able to put a lot of players on this roster on 2 years. So for that reasoning, I'm saying 2 years, $17 million, fully guaranteed contract. Josh Jacobs knows where he's at the next 2 seasons. So that's my offer to Josh Jacobs.